again, everyone. This is Ben Stone, Director of Arts and Culture with Transportation for America and Smart Growth America. Giving everyone a little bit of buffer time to get settled, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's just a couple minutes after 2 on the East Coast. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on the state-of-the-art transportation trainings. You're going to hear after my intro from folks in Bozeman, Buffalo, and Mariposa. I'll introduce them in just a few minutes. Before I do that, I want to go over what we're planning to do on our hour-long webinar today. I'll tell you a little bit about Transportation for America's arts and culture work. If you're not familiar with the work we've been doing, I'll recap what we did through these state-of-the-art transportation trainings, thanks to the National Endowment for the Arts for funding these workshops. Tell you a little bit about our do-it-yourself toolkit, so those of you who were not participating in the workshops we already ran can actually run some of these yourself in your own town. Tell you about a brand new program which we're going to launch later this week. We have a new fellowship program thanks to Kresge Foundation. Give you a little teaser on that. And then finally, I'll hand things off to the folks in the 3 cities to tell you about all the work they are up to at the moment. So to start, Transportation for America, I think most of you are probably familiar with our organization. We really envision a transportation system that safely and affordably connects people of all means and ability to jobs, services, and opportunity, one of our new mission statements. Work in communities across the country. And we, in the last 3 years, have taken on work in the arts and culture realm where we've worked with artists and designers and arts administrators. And we do that kind of work in a number of different ways. One, by supporting what are known as creative placemaking projects to really create exemplary case study projects. In one of our last webinars, we had folks in a few of the cities where we've been working, Dothan, Alabama, Indianapolis, and Los Angeles, talk about some of that work where we've been supporting with direct funding and technical assistance, creative placemaking projects that have had artists working on all different kinds of transportation projects around the country. We also study these sorts of projects so we can better communicate their benefits, much like we're doing today. Many of you are hopefully familiar with our field scan on arts, culture, and transportation. If you're not, you can find that on t4america.org. And then finally, most relevant to our webinar today, we train practitioners and connect peers to help expand the field and get more people involved in this kind of interesting and new and creative work of bringing the arts and culture into transportation work. Before I jump in a little bit more about the workshops we've been running, I wanted to hand things over to Patricia Walsh, who is with Americans for the Arts, who's been our other key partner on these workshops. So please take it away, Patricia.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. So my name is Patricia Walsh. I'm the Public Art and Civic Design Senior Program Manager at Americans for the Arts. That's me, so hello, everybody. It's been really fantastic working with Ben and Sophie and the Transportation for America team on this project over the past year and a half, and really looking forward to this webinar as we're heading forward. So a little bit about Americans for the Arts. We're a national nonprofit arts organization. This is our full mission, which essentially says that we're here to support the arts and cultural leaders on the ground who are making the arts happen within their communities. Who we support primarily are what we call local arts agencies. These are your arts councils, your arts commissions. In some places, because they look very different across the country, some places they're your heritage preservation councils. But they're really these agencies or these nexus organizations that are there making the arts and culture thrive within their local communities. And those are the people that we support on the local level. And how we do this with Americans for the Arts is we advocate, research, do network building and leadership and field education. We advocate on the national, state, and local level for policies that are pro-arts. We do research to help support the communication of value for the arts, such as the economic impact study of the arts, as well as public opinion polls around the arts. We build networks across the country from like-minded individuals who are doing similar work. For example, public art administrators. We have one that are new around county arts administrators, as well as a new one that we just launched around arts and culture leaders of color that we're very excited to move forward with over the next year or so. We also do a lot of leadership and field education. This is our professional development component. We do a lot of online trainings. We do in-person trainings. We collaborate with partners like Transportation for America and others to do in-person work. We have an annual convention that we do as well to really make sure that people understand and have the resources and information they need to do the work to advance the arts and culture on their local level. And then my last slide is just a little bit more about the work I do, which is really looking at the intersection of art and artist in the built environment, and how do we support that work moving forward. I do this through 4 main ways, through field education, this is around professional development, in-person as well as online trainings, network building. I manage a list of over 400 public art professionals, administrators, consultants, artists, et cetera, of people that are really interested in doing this work and supporting and building this work across the country. We do a lot of research, policy, and advocacy work, supporting national policies that support arts and culture in the built environment, as well as building strategic partnerships. So along with Transportation for America, we're building ones with American Planning Association, the National Coalition of County Administrators, and others across the country. So that's a bit about AFTA, and we're really excited to be here today.
Great, thank you so much, Patricia, for all your help on the project. So I'm just going to spend a quick minute. I think it's honestly much more interesting to hear from everybody we worked with in 3 communities where we did work than to hear from me, but I did want to recap a little bit about what we did for those of you not familiar with the state-of-the-art transportation training. It's a bit of a mouthful. This was a competitive program, as I mentioned, funded by the National Endowment for the Arts to train both transportation professionals and arts professionals on how to work together, how to speak the same language, so to speak, and really collaborate on projects where everyone felt like they were equal contributors to the outcomes in the project. We had this call out a little over a year ago or so now, a competitive process. We're able to select these 3 communities, 3 very different communities, Bozeman, Montana, Buffalo, New York, and Mariposa, California. 1 larger city in Buffalo, 1 much, much smaller rural community in Sierra foothills in Mariposa, and then a very rapidly growing but relatively small city in Bozeman. Americans for the Arts was our partner in this. We brought in a lot of outside experts from different transit agencies and some outside consultants to really support these projects. And as a national organization, we of course don't have the capacity to work in every community in the country, so we ran these 3 projects as pilot projects with the goal of then producing, you hopefully see on your screen now, a do-it-yourself toolkit, recognizing that many of the folks who are tuned in today and other folks who applied are interested in doing this work and bringing people together and would like to have a guide on what a good framework would be to have these kinds of conversations in building knowledge on creative placemaking and public art in the transportation sector, as well as transportation language and issues from the arts sector. And so that's what this guide is. I'm not going to go through page by page, but I'll just show you the table of contents here. It gives you a basic understanding of how to do this, what the purpose of it is, a guide to actually building the training, to putting together the team you'll need, some very basic logistical suggestions about what to do the day before the training as you're getting ready, the day of the training, how you can follow up, and the kinds of templates we used in the 3 communities where we worked to really get people together and agree on specific actions to take after we leave town. Whenever we do a workshop, whether it's a day or 2 days or 3 days, we always like to leave everybody with a series of action steps so that the work, of course, really starts with the workshop rather than wrapping up, and then we follow up with folks after the fact. I show this not because we expect everybody to go out and do this without our support, but because we want people to have that opportunity. We also welcome folks to contact us. We've already contracted with a few cities and are doing some more of these workshops in other places and are likely announcing more of these in the future. But as a stopgap measure, we certainly welcome you to use this guide to do them yourself. And it's just another view of what the guide looks with one of our team members, Joseph Kunkel from New Mexico in the upper right there. If anyone has any questions about this, we'll have time for questions at the end for myself and everyone else who's presenting today. We also encourage you to send us emails if you have questions that don't get answered on the webinar today. Final thing before I hand it off to our wonderful speakers for today is our brand new program, which we're again just teasing. We'll hopefully have this up and running and announced by the end of this week. We are running a new fellowship with support from the Kresge Foundation called the ACT Fellowship, Arts, Culture, and Transportation. It's similar to a lot of the work we've done before. Rather than go out to communities and support projects in those places, we're going to be essentially doing the inverse of that. We're going to be accepting applications from teams from cities and towns around the country, teams that are made up of 2 or 3 people per city, ideally someone with an arts background or design background and someone with a transportation background, either in planning, design, or engineering, to come together and learn from their peers in other cities, to learn from the teams we'll be putting together. We'll be bringing people together with funding to come together for 3 in-person convenings over the course of a year, as well as a number of online trainings over the course of that year. We have a lot more information that is just getting finalized as we speak, and will be up online in the next couple of days. And encourage you to send us your questions about that, and of course to check out the application form, which will be due in a little over a month from now, once that is up on our website soon. So with that, I'm going to head things off to our first speakers. You'll hear from folks, as I mentioned, in Mariposa, California, Bozeman, Montana, and Buffalo, New York, in that order. And I'm going to now hand things off to Mikey and Kara in Mariposa. Take it away.
All right. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
On behalf of okay, good. On behalf of Mikey and the whole community of Mariposa, I'd like to express our appreciation to Ben and his team for bringing the Transportation for America State of the Arts Capacity Building Workshop to Mariposa County. Slide ahead. For those of you not familiar with Mariposa, we are a rural county located in the Central Sierra region of California. The largest town in the county and the government seat is also called Mariposa, and it was built along the Mariposa Creek. And the continued development of the Mariposa Creek Parkway, which is a pedestrian path currently being built in stages, was the focus of our workshop. But I want to back up just a little bit to better contextualize the larger issues at play within the Creek Parkway. Mariposa County is home to Yosemite National Park, the Merced Wild and Scenic River, and it trades heavily on our Gold Rush era history. And these natural and cultural assets are a tremendous value to our community, and they draw visitors from all over the world. But these features are also extremely susceptible to natural disasters like fire and flooding, rock slides, mudslides, and also government policies such as shutdowns. And when these occur, and they happen more than occasionally, our local economy immediately experiences devastating losses, especially small locally owned businesses. So we're really heavily reliant on the park. Furthermore, our historic, environmental, cultural, and social landscape extends much further than Yosemite, and it encompasses a broad spectrum of rich, nuanced, complex community narratives, needs, and challenges. So with this in mind, Mariposa County, specifically the Planning Department and the Mariposa County Arts Council, have been working in concert to develop opportunities to advance creative placemaking initiatives that reflect and respond more inclusively to the community, while also inviting visitors to expand their exploration of the county beyond Yosemite and the Merced River Canyon. And this is where we return to the Creek Parkway, which was one of these, or is one of these initiatives. So knowing that any effort must begin by bringing together a lot of important community stakeholders to develop an understanding of creative placemaking and its potential to activate a space, we used the Transportation for America State-of-the-Art Workshop to gather artists, musicians, performers, county planners, educators, law enforcement, business owners, public health administrators, economic development partners, transportation advocates, historic preservation experts, human and social services providers, land conservationists, and interested citizens to gain a greater understanding of creative placemaking within the context of the Creek Parkway. The hope was to develop a shared vision and language for the space that reflects and responds to a variety of community needs and narratives, and builds partnerships and plans for collective action among disparate community organizations and departments. And as an aside, and beyond the Creek Parkway, we've already seen the foundational work laid at the workshop bear fruit, as many of our stakeholders who have participated in the workshop are beginning to turn to artists and designers to help conceptualize, develop, and implement their own independent projects. I'm going to turn it over to Mikey now, and he can kind of talk about the ongoing work with this project.
Well, thank you. My name is Mikey Gorelnik. I'm the Community Design and Development Planner working for Mariposa County from the Planning Department. And yeah, I just want to echo Kara's sentiments. This has been a really significant and meaningful moment for our community, both in terms of the Creek Parkway project, but as Kara alluded to, for other projects as well. So if anybody is listening in from an interested community, interested in participating in this endeavor in the future, please do. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Kara introduced you all to our little rural community here, and some of the challenges that that we face both from an environmental and an economic and demographic and cultural perspective. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about how we're beginning to integrate the SOTA workshop, the state-of-the-art transportation workshop, and its outcomes into the next phase for implementing the Mariposa Creek Parkway project. Incidentally, while we were applying for this opportunity, we also were sort of coordinating that grant application with another grant application for, here in California, the State Department of Transportation has a really cool grant program, and I imagine other states do as well, that supports, it's called the Sustainable Communities Transportation Planning Grant. So basically it's a grant that supports cool planning efforts for impactful transportation, community building projects like the Mariposa Creek Parkway. So we were able to, coincidentally really take the content from our grant application for the state-of-the-art opportunity and fold a lot of that into this other grant application for this larger master plan, or this larger grant to support a master plan for the Creek Parkway, which was successful. And so we found out while we were working with Ben and Sophie and Patricia and everyone else, that we were going to be able to fund this master plan grant, which is great. And I think I did say coincidentally, but there's definitely a lot of synergy. Obviously, we were applying for one grant, and we're able to kind of take the content and the thinking and certainly Kara and mine's partnership that had developed through the state-of-the-art transportation opportunity and just sort of roll that into this other grant. So just a quick way to mention that even if your application to this program or similar programs isn't successful, obviously it can bear a lot of fruit in the future. So anyway, we were working on this master plan. We've since had it funded, so we're currently working on the Mariposa Creek Parkway master plan. And part of the Creek Parkway master, so we solicited responses from interested consultants. We got a lot of great ideas from a lot of great firms from all across the country. But one of the reasons why we chose the firm we did is because they recommended this idea, which they called Creek Week. So essentially, the idea was to take to do this creative placemaking project, which is also a community planning project in Mariposa Creek, to solicit ideas for the future for the Mariposa Creek Parkway, but also to provide people with kind of an opportunity to prototype and think critically about different ways of imagining and designing the Creek Parkway. And so we were able to sort of recommend this brand new, this is like a new idea for our small rural community. We were able to kind of get a lot of traction with that idea through these partnerships that Kara mentioned, this kind of diaspora of cool people and interesting people and thought leaders and community advocates and just great citizens who had never really heard of creative placemaking or had never really thought of using the Creek Parkway as an opportunity to think about economic development or public health or other goals, but we're introduced to those ideas through our workshop experience. So Creek Week is now going to be taking place. It's next month. It's really exciting opportunity for us. It essentially is in and of itself a creative placemaking opportunity. It is an opportunity for us to use art and design to activate and think differently and effectively about and inclusively about using this transportation project to achieve all the goals that Kara alluded to in terms of making our economy more resilient and telling a more holistic and inclusive story about our community that doesn't rely on our one kind of major and most recognizable resource, and to do all these great things that we've been able to identify through the master planning process and have wanted to do for a really long time, but never really had a lightning rod like this workshop to bring people together to think about it. But in addition to Creek Week itself being a creative placemaking endeavor, I wanted to just mention quickly that we're also thinking about we're using Creek Week as an opportunity to actually drive art. So this is obviously a highly detailed rendering of what that might look like. So we're going to be soliciting the community's input and feedback and doing all the stuff that you would do in a community meeting during this this Creek Week event. But we're also going to be working with local artists and designers to implement some kind of art element, a temporary kind of pop-up art element through the Mariposa Creek corridor, which we expect will help activate the space during the event, but also obviously sort of challenge people to think about how we can continue to use art and design to facilitate, not just in the Creek Parkway and other public spaces, more ownership, a more effectively articulated local sense of identity, and just a more compelling and interesting space. So while we're thinking of Creek Week, and again, just like the whole sort of notion behind Creek Week, this idea that we'll be putting these sort of, and in this case we're going to be using this sort of repeated vertical colorful element, which is just something that we've decided on. But that concept was, and I think in a lot of cases remains, pretty foreign to a lot of our community. But through this workshop, we were able to kind of introduce people, loosen the lid on this idea that art and transportation go hand in hand, and have art shouldn't be thought of as this sort of addendum or thing that comes on after the transportation project is built or implemented, but that it is an integral part of the transportation project. So that idea is new, and since we had this opportunity to train people and think about these ideas, introduce these ideas, they've gotten traction really quickly, and we're going to be doing something in that regard in the next month. But again, as a planner, I want to just reiterate that we're going to be doing all that in the context of getting community input and hopefully more inclusive and representational input from more people who are interested in this project, or being engaged in community building projects in general, but wouldn't otherwise participate in your sort of your typical public meeting that takes place at the Board of Supervisors meeting place from 5 to 6 on a Wednesday. By using this creative placemaking kind of framework and approach, we're hoping to make this event and future events like it more compelling and interesting to a wider array of people in the community who may not otherwise be involved in these types of projects, and in so doing get a more representational and holistic feedback on this significant transportation investment. So thanks again to everybody who's been involved in this effort. Like I said, Kara and I are both super grateful, and our partnership is much better because of this opportunity. And we're excited to hear about what the other folks are working on as well. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you so much, Mikey and Kara. Thank you also for sticking exactly to your time limit. You've set the bar for the other folks coming up next. We'll have time for questions for Mikey and Kara. They'll still be around at the end, so hold your thoughts on that, or feel free to type them into the chat bar in the bottom left of your screen. And with that, without further ado, we're going to hand things off to Jim with Mountain Time Arts and Sunshine with HRDC in Bozeman. Please take it away.
Hello, everybody. This is Jim Madden and Sunshine Ross. Jim, I work for a public arts nonprofit in Bozeman called Mountain Time Arts, and Sunshine is the director of the public transportation system here in Bozeman that's called Streamline. And we also want to thank Ben and Sophie and Patricia for the workshop. It was a wonderful opportunity for our community and exposed a really wide cross-section of people to the usefulness of place-based art as a resource and a catalyst for advancing civic issues such as transportation. So Sunshine's going to talk about our place here.
Thanks, Jim. This is downtown Bozeman, and we're located, like Jim said, in Gallatin County, and that's in the southwest part of Montana. We have abundant natural resources, amenities that include nearby Yellowstone National Park, views of the mountains and open spaces, and recreation attractions like skiing, hunting, hiking, fishing. Bozeman is also home to Montana State University. While it's still an agricultural hub, it also has a growing technology industry and the busiest airport in the state. Bozeman is rapidly evolving from a small city to a metropolitan area. With an annual growth rate of over 4%, it's the fastest growing micropolitan region in the nation. It's expected to move from a rural community to a small urban with the 2020 census, and this creates mobility challenges that will require a more robust regional transit system because, of course, we can't build ourselves out of this transportation challenge. Along with the growth rate, a unique challenge is that the public transit system, Streamline, is run by a nonprofit agency instead of a government entity. So no local tax dollars are specifically designated to public transit through an urban transit district. But we do receive funding from the city, but we must ask for it every year. And the other challenge is that Streamline is a relatively new system. We're just finishing up our 12th year, and we provide around 300,000 rides a year. But besides the limited funding, Streamline lacks a strong public profile. By enhancing the public's awareness through local artists, we feel it'll attract more riders and boost a creation of a coalition advocating for additional local funding. Our Bozeman team members involved in the Transportation for America workshop and the follow-up projects are HRDC, that's the nonprofit community action agency that runs Streamline, and Western Transportation Institute. It's a university-based research center focused on rural transportation. Mountain Time Arts, a nonprofit producing bold, engaging public art projects. Future West, addressing growth and change in the Northern Rocky Mountains, and a Healthy Communities design consultant working with multiple communities across the state.
Our transportation challenge here is basically the rapid growth that Sunshine mentioned. The challenge is to invest in the public transit so that it stays apace of the growth. We're expected to double in population in the next 25 years, and so people are moving here at a rapid rate, and the challenge is to have the transit system expand as fast as the population. The current route system that's on the slide serves the city core with a downtown hub and a university hub, and then also two neighboring towns where many people live who commute back and forth to Bozeman, the towns of Belgrade to the west and Livingston to the east. And it also connects two distinct shopping areas. A challenge is to channel growth patterns that provide density that can be served efficiently by public transit, and not to continue patterns of suburban sprawl. So land use regulations, or more to the point in the county, the lack thereof, present a significant challenge to achieving dense neighborhood nodes that have commercial services nearby to housing and that are walkable, bikeable, and able to be served efficiently and effectively by the Streamline system as it expands. Without these patterns, traffic congestion from cars will only get worse as our population skyrockets. So this slide shows a historic view of Bozeman. It's a pretty typical western town, small lots, and pretty easily served by the existing system. However, it's surrounded by county land that has very rich agricultural soils and good wildlife habitat. So the opportunity is to integrate transportation expansion with land use patterns. And Bozeman has pretty good land use regulations, but in the county and actually in pretty much all of Montana, zoning is a four-letter word, and the surrounding county has very lax land use regulations. But there's an opportunity that Bozeman, Belgrade, and Gallatin County are each currently rewriting their growth policies. So there's an opportunity to grow smartly. So a challenge that our workshop group set for ourselves was to implement ART to raise the visibility of the streamlined system to the general public, to demonstrate that a robust public transit system benefits everybody, all citizens, whether they ride Streamline or not. So most of our project ideas are around that goal. Another challenge is funding. Riding is free, and the system is principally funded by the city. The state of Montana distributes federal dollars to the system, and then there's contributions from the university itself and also from the Student Association. So in order to expand the frequency and geography of service, more funding is needed. And a strategy for this is to demonstrate to businesses the benefit that Streamline provides, such as the hospital and other large employers, that they and their employees and customers would benefit more than what they may contribute if they were to financially support the system expansion.
So in this slide, it's a picture of our workshop, and that the woman at the front of the room is our mayor, and she participated, and she also serves on many boards and councils related to art, so that's a good connection there. We also had in attendance a Gallatin County Commission candidate, and he was later elected, so we were all very happy about that since he seems to be transit friendly. We had representatives from Montana State University, the Office of Sustainability, and a campus planner / project manager. We also had someone from the City County Health Department in attendance, Bozeman Health Deaconess Hospital, who is one of our major employers in Bozeman. We had a high school art teacher and an art student, and then various other transit supporters and or artists. So following the educational presentations on day one, we had a Streamline walk, roll, and ride audit, where participants had the opportunity to ride Streamline, which some never had, and they were assigned to a unique character that represented someone that usually uses public transit, and each group was assigned a tour route. This allowed for experiences that were new and different from their own, and they were asked to identify areas for improvement on the bus itself, the passenger amenities, quality of sidewalks, pedestrian and cyclist connectivity, and the use of public art. Then the group met back up to discuss the key takeaways. So some of the projects that came out of that design thinking workshop were to increase funding for Streamline, and the first step was to create a Friends of Streamline membership program, which would build a branded coalition of supporters to help spread the message that Streamline is important to the Bozeman community. And they could lead the bus stop adoption program to improve riders' experience. Next was a regional planning coordination, which would ensure that growth occurs in a controlled manner benefiting residents and businesses. And that will keep transit on the radar of the planning coordinating committee, which was, as Jim had mentioned, Bozeman, Belgrade, and the county, an area that forms a triangle geography. And then we can bring together artists, designers, branding companies, historians, and indigenous people to develop an outreach campaign. Next would be implement a community-informed multimodal wayfinding project. We found that some of our stop locations were not always easy to find. So we would want to gather community input on those locations that need the most attention. And then this would increase the visibility of the stop, but we could also increase visibility of the nearby landmarks and connection points. And that would make it a little more feasible, or at least seem more feasible, to navigate Bozeman without a car, since we are very car-centric still. And next was improve the visibility of Streamline, which is done at the same time as the wayfinding project. We would be committing to building an artist-designed bench to improve visibility and functionality of the bus. And this would be a collaboration between donors, Streamline, the City of Bozeman, and the county. And we would engage the community in the creative process and in turn improve the rider experience. And we also want to expand Streamline users, and not just people who don't have another choice, but we want to attract riders who choose Streamline, so that'll increase our ridership. And also that'll that could create a stakeholder group that could identify other target groups that would potentially become streamline advocates and or writers. And lastly, to elevate transit through cinematography and data, we want to change the perception about transit by developing a short film and tell the story of transit. And that'll change perceptions about transit, and that needs to happen in order for us to manage growth and vehicular congestion.
Lastly, the lessons learned and next steps here in Bozeman. What people learned at the workshop itself was the importance of coordinating regional planning with transit expansion, that a robust public transit system benefits all citizens, that automobile use is actually widely subsidized by free parking. We don't charge for parking downtown, et cetera. Or in the case of Montana, pickup trucks are mostly subsidized rather than automobiles. And that we need to better engage with businesses that benefit from the streamlined system. As Sunshine mentioned, we identified 6 areas where implementation of ART could make a difference. And our core working group that designed the workshop and worked with Ben and Sophie and Patricia to design the workshop, we continue to meet to explore next steps to implement our 6 project concepts. Capacity and funding are challenges for this, but we are persevering. Projects that have been accomplished or underway or gaining traction are, we completed a 90-second Why I Ride Streamline video that was interviews with a dozen different people of varying ages who are enthusiastic about their public transit experiences. They mentioned conserving resources, chatting with others and building relationships. They don't have to drive. They don't have to park. It's fast. It's convenient, safe, efficient. The drivers are friendly, and it's fun. Another project that's underway is we're calling the Bus Box Project. Many of the stops are not very visible, and they only have a small sign and no amenities for persons waiting. Only the larger hubs have shelters and waiting. So there's no seating or shelter for most of the stops, which is a little difficult, particularly in the winter. But Western Transportation Institute has organized a group of seniors to fabricate 2x2x2 plywood boxes that artists will decorate and can be placed at stops to make them more visible and provide seating. So this is an inexpensive thing to do, and we're looking forward to seeing the results that may bring. MSU, Montana State University, has a very robust architecture program. So there's some architecture students that are designing bus shelter prototypes that may be built as part of a National Service Day coming up in April. The lack of a official public arts agency in Bozeman is an impediment for locating funding for some of our ideas. But our current mayor that was in the earlier slide has a goal to establish a % for Art program within the next 2 years. So our core group is going to be working with her to see how we can help her advance that, to expand the stakeholders for that idea. And HRDC, who runs the Streamline system, has hired a graphic designer on staff to do community outreach, and that person will provide follow-up on some of our projects. And lastly, there's opportunity to use partnerships with organizations who attended the workshop to leverage our resources, such as the high school art department and students of the hospital and other large businesses. So that's it from Bozeman. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sunshine and Jim. We are going to move to our last, but certainly not least city, Buffalo, New York. And we will let Julie and Emerson, who's also on the line with the city of Buffalo, bring us home. Please take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, Ben. As Ben mentioned, my name is Julie Fetzer. I'm an engineer for the Department of Public Works in Buffalo, New York, and I'm also here with Emerson Barr, who is the director of the Buffalo Arts Commission. Buffalo is a mid-sized city. We have a population of about 250,000 people. We're situated in upstate New York along Lake Erie, and we're actually the second largest city in New York. As part of our city ordinance, we have a 1% for public art ordinance that calls for 1% of transportation investments to go to public art. So we applied for the Transportation for America workshop so that our Public Works and Arts Commission can learn how to work better together in order to maximize the investment that we have made in public art, and to ensure that that investment is benefiting our communities to the fullest extent. As part of the workshop, we identified a project focus to work through that will have a % for art go towards it. And we wanted to work through it as part of the workshop in order to learn how we can adjust our process of projects going forward. The projects that we identified, we were calling Middle Main Street. Main Street is a main north-south arterial in the city of Buffalo, and the section of Middle Main is about 2.5 miles long. In many ways, it's a buffer in the city. It's a buffer between neighborhoods, between different demographics, census districts, city council districts, and there's a big separation between the west side of the street and the east side of the street in terms of what the neighborhoods look like. It was also identified in the City of Buffalo's Bike Master Plan as a catalyst project, meaning that if we really wanted to implement projects to enhance our bicycle network, Middle Main was identified as one of the priority projects, and the Bike Master Plan called for protected facilities along this stretch of Main Street. It's also part of our Metro Rail route in the City of Buffalo. So on the street there's bus service, and then running underground is our Metro Rail line, and the stations for the Metro Rail are situated along the street. And the other reason why we chose it for the focus of the workshop is because the identity of this street changes a lot throughout the corridor, which, moving on, once you drop down into the street, you get a good idea of. So starting off here, we're at the lower end of the Middle Main Street project, and you can see that there's some tall buildings on the left side of the page. There's a strong identity to this section of Main Street. It's adjacent to our medical campus, and also a strong neighborhood community on the other side of the street, and it has a very strong identity that goes with it. Additionally, if you take a look at the street itself, you can notice that there's really 6 different lanes. The ones against the curb are usually used for parking rather than through travel, and the parking is usually heavily utilized. Now if we move up about 2 miles to the north side of the corridor, you can see how it changes how it looks. In this section, there's more mature trees, more green space. This section is adjacent to a college campus and a historic cemetery, so the trees are much more mature, and it has a different vibrancy to it than it does down in the medical corridor. Now if we move to the middle section of Middle Main, you can see the difference in the streetscape. So there's really a lack of trees, parking isn't as heavily utilized, and there's not as much of an identity in terms of the businesses that are adjacent to the corridor. So during our workshop, we focused on Middle Main Street as a project focus to learn how we can use the corridor to better implement art to enhance our transportation investment of our streetscape projects that will be going there. So there were a variety of people that we invited to and attended our workshop. They had backgrounds in engineering, planning, transit, art, as well as inviting community stakeholders along Middle Main Street to participate. As part of the workshop, we did do an intro to transportation and an intro to arts segments just to get everyone speaking the same language, which was really important moving forward. We also went out onto the corridor of Middle Main to do a walking audit. So from the pictures that I showed on the previous slides, you actually got to walk on the street and feel how the street changes, how you feel different walking on the street as you move into the different sections of the corridor. They also got to see firsthand the transportation challenges that people have even crossing Middle Main Street because it's so wide. They got to see, maybe ramps that weren't easy to cross or push buttons that had no feedback, and if you were impaired in some way, was really difficult to navigate. Moving forward, we are starting the design process for Middle Main Street, and we are using what we learned in the workshop to go forward with the project. One of the things that we heard over and over again from the participants was the importance just of everyone being in the same room together during the workshop, because it wasn't very often that planners and engineers and artists were all sitting in the same room and talking the same language. So moving forward, we have taken away these lessons to have conversations about the incorporation of art early and often during our transportation projects, and we're excited to implement the ideas and takeaways from the workshop into our future projects.
Great, thank you so much, Julie. That takes us to the end of our presentations. We have just about 10 minutes left in the hour for questions. I know we had a few come in. I'm going to have Sophie, who is the other half of the Arts and Culture team at Transportation for America, read off some of those to us as they come in.
Yeah, so if you all see it on your left-hand corner of your screen, you should have a chat box, so feel free to send questions there. Some questions have already been coming in, but just in case you weren't sure where to ask them. The first question is in relation to how the workshop organizers were able to get such a diverse group of stakeholders. If there's any advice that any of the speakers could provide on how to make sure that the workshops involve people with different perspectives and diverse representation. So if any one of the speakers would like to take a stab at that, please do so.
This is Jim from Bozeman. I think one thing that helped here was our core group that was planning the workshop was there were about 6 of us. And from a pretty broad spectrum to begin with, and that really helped network out into the community. And then quickly, secondly, HRDC, who runs Streamline, they provide many other social services besides the bus, so they had a wide net as well. That's it from Bozeman.
This is Buffalo, and we can also speak a little bit to that. In our case, it was really helpful to have both the Buffalo Arts Commission and Buffalo Public Works on board at the very beginning of the workshop, because the Arts Commission was able to reach out to the art community, and Public Works was able to reach out to our transit authority as well as stakeholders along the corridor and our engineering consultants to attend the workshop. And it also helped that we already had our percent for our ordinance implemented, because our engineers and artists were very familiar that this is already happening, and that but moving forward with projects, how to make this process easier and maximize its benefit.
This is Mikey in Mariposa County. I just like to add that I think it's important. It was really important in our case to be able to really articulate how you anticipate certain stakeholders being able to participate and contribute, and what you think, how you see this project being important for them. Certainly, in our case, one thing that we dealt with, I wouldn't say struggled with, because it was actually really fun, but one thing that we encountered was that most people just think of the Mariposa Creek Parkway as a path or a trail or part of the sidewalk or whatever, and had never really, and it's just been that way for a really long time. So Kara and I were really committed to reaching out to groups that may not have thought about the Mariposa Creek Parkway as a potential catalyst or linchpin for their program, or what their sort of their as county employees or as just individuals with certain passions, thought about how the Creek Parkway supports and can be a resource to those interests. So I would say for folks looking to build a diverse coalition, take a little time to think about, be in those members' shoes, to think about how they may see the project and work against that, so that they can see it as a larger resource and something that immediately adds value to what they're working on.
Great, thank you all. We have a few more questions that are coming in. One is for Buffalo. So Julie, if you could address this one. It's a question how Buffalo's, I just got a message that Buffalo's accidentally disconnected. So we will skip that question for the moment and head to one that is for everybody. One question is how any of the workshop leaders had to deal with municipal leaders. In particular, were there any instances through which municipal leaders were resisting the work against walkability in favor of private car use? I don't know if maybe Bozeman could speak to that, or if anyone else could contribute to that question.
This is Mariposa County again. We didn't really have any issues where people were explicitly opposed to our walkability or bikeability agenda, but like Bozeman, our community is built for trucks. It's a rural community, and the private automobile certainly reigns supreme, and people are always concerned about any community building or design initiative that might impact parking or whatever in Mariposa. So the way that we approach that, and I think certainly this workshop provided us a good opportunity to do so, was to frame our project in terms of its economic development and, again, creative placemaking and storytelling capacity. A lot of our elected officials, all of our elected officials, rightly so, are interested in doing things that support local businesses, and we view our project as being a real resource for local businesses. So we were able to tell that story, the role that the Creek Parkway would play in supporting local businesses, providing more access to local businesses, providing potentially new real estate for local businesses, things like that, to not necessarily counteract, but to support and be a counterpart to the larger, more immediate, or I guess maybe more recognizable benefits of the project, which are to walkability and bikeability and pedestrian uses of the project. So I think certainly, with regards to this question, it wasn't necessarily parking decks and private, that there was anybody saying that they didn't like our project because of that it gets in the way of car usage. But we were able to kind of nip that if there were any concerns related to that in the bud by focusing on the multiple benefits that we kind of see our project offering.
Great. Thanks, Mikey. We have one other kind of bigger picture question that I'm confident all of you all are able to tackle, which is why is creative placemaking important?
This is Jim from Bozeman. I would say that it's important because here in Bozeman we have the Western Transportation Institute that has all sorts of data, every kind of data you could imagine that supports the value of public transit and why just putting money into wider roads and more parking is really an effective use of funds. But that data doesn't touch people in a way that really makes them care about it and going to meetings and getting depressed. And so creative placemaking can really tell story. I think storytelling is at the bottom of it, whether it's just visual storytelling or some kind of more temporal storytelling, but telling the story in a way that touches people to make them care rather than just listen to facts. That's it from me.
We would just add that creative placemaking has been a really useful kind of phrase for our community because it means like so much. So you can fold in like any cool idea that you have related to community building. Certainly, we really agree with that idea of storytelling as being a fundamental component of creative placemaking. But just it's important as a framework to welcome anybody and any number of interesting and progressive and provocative and just cool ideas into the community building and community design and community planning work that we engage in. So just broadly, we really like it because it's so flexible, it's so adaptable.
I might also just add that it is a framework like Mikey's talking about, but it's a framework that allows for innovative partnerships to kind of blossom in ways that we might not have imagined previously as we're working in our little vacuums and silos. If we approach a project from the lens of creative placemaking, as we want to look at a specific place and specific issues that are pertinent or relevant to that, who can we draw in to kind of work together in a collective way and to the service of our community. And I think, here in our community, we've got education and law enforcement and public health. These are departments that aren't typically working together within the context of art, but because of creative placemaking in that framework, we were able to do that.
Great. Thank you for those responses. Ben, again, that's a great way to close out our webinar. I want to just give a quick thank you to Sophie Schoenfeld. I mentioned she's the other half of our arts and culture team. She's been running the show behind the scenes, both with the webinar today and then with all the workshops that we conducted in the three communities. So thank you, Sophie. I wanted to thank, again, the National Endowment for the Arts for funding this program. Thank Americans for the Arts for helping us to run it. And then, of course, thank all of our speakers for joining us today and also for helping us run the workshops in each of their communities and to everybody who participated in all those workshops. Couple parting thoughts, parting announcements as we wrap up here today. I've got a couple questions coming in asking for more information about the fellowship and some of the other things I mentioned at the beginning. We'll have more about all of that in a follow-up email that we'll send to everybody who registered. So anyone who signed up to attend this webinar, whether you actually did chime in or you're planning on listening to it later, we'll send you a follow-up email with links to the DIY guide, information about the fellowship that I teased at the beginning, as well as a recording, a YouTube recording, so you can go back and either listen to the whole thing yourself or share it with anyone you'd like to. I also encourage all of you to look into the organizations that presented today. You heard from folks representing a bunch of different city and county agencies, as well as some nonprofits, and you heard about their work related to the workshop projects. But everybody involved in these workshop projects is doing a whole host of other interesting projects and interesting programs. I encourage you to look into all of them, and we'll send out some links for you to do that. And then finally, we're certainly not a tourism organization, but hopefully from the stories you heard and the images you saw, you're all encouraged to go and visit and check out these places. I encourage you to do that as well. With that, that'll wrap us up for today, and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Take care.